Photographers are gigantic snobs. We would argue about the silliest things, like, oh, you're not shooting with a Leica, or you're not shooting with a Hasselblad. As technology changed and everything started to even out, there would be this argument of like, oh, I shoot Canon or I shoot Nikon. And now it's kind of evolved to something different. Now we're talking about digital versus film. So today, I'm going to talk about 8 topics that I've commonly heard when people talk about film versus digital. Hey everybody, it's Tori from CLC, and today I really wanted to break it down and talk about digital versus film. Now, to start this bad boy off, I want to first tell you, I'm a kid of the 80s. I had a lot of cameras growing up, and I did work with film. And I will honestly say that in my own personal life and my career, I had to decide when I went to college, what am I going to study? Journalism or photography? Now, this channel is dedicated to photojournalists, but this is a real world thing that I have to think about. When it came to me going to school, I had to decide if I could actually afford to be a photographer. And that was the big thing. Photography came with a giant toll because I grew up in the film generation. Sure, we can sit there and talk about it now like, oh, well, film cameras are cheaper now because of digital, but during that day where film was the primo technology there, I had to decide if I'm going to buy this camera, invest in lenses, and could I afford the week-to-week experience of going out and shooting with film and paying for that film. And now the argument is, hey, digital and film, which is better? And of course, photographers will sit there and say, well, if you're not shooting film, you're not really shooting photos. Just like as I'm kind of a snob now where I go, you shot that photo with an iPhone. Is it on the same level as me shooting with my DSLR? Pictures are pictures. Now, I'm going to go ahead and bust down 8 of the topics that I heard when it came to film versus digital. So the first one on this list is film teaches you to be more meticulous. There's a little truth to that, but it's kind of nuanced. When I first went out and had my first digital camera, my job had given me this camera and said, go out there and shoot this event. Of course, at that time, I probably took 100 frames per event. And of course, we think about film where you only have 24 to 12 images. You don't really have that chance to do that. Over the years, I learned though that I can't go out and shoot like that all the time. So now that I'm a more experienced photographer, I go out and I can probably take a good 5 or 6 images and get exactly what I want. When we say things like film makes you more meticulous, what you're really saying is, I'm limited, so I have to think about every shot. Now, if you're an experienced photographer of any caliber, you're probably not going to gunfire off 100 shots every time you shoot something. You're going to wait, snap the photo, and be done with it. So, it's not exactly, hey, this camera is forcing me to do this, but the mindset of a photographer who knows I should only be doing this. Meditation during the film processing. When it comes to film photographers, there is kind of this moment of zen where you have to think, I took this shot, I'm done with that moment, move on. Just like when you think about when you're processing a film, here's the process, this is what I'm doing. Now, people who have worked in offices with me, they know, okay, I'm in my zen moment when I take my card, I put it in a Lightroom, and I sit there and listen out to some Slipknot and just get my work done. So when you sit there and say, well, there's this whole process and meditation and things that you learn during the darkroom effect, you're getting it in a Lightroom. Film teaches light. Okay, that one I totally don't agree with, but let's go ahead and talk about it. So we buy certain films because they give us better contrast, or they teach us like, hey, this ISO will shoot this kind of exposure. And so we say film teaches you light. That's not necessarily true. Everything that you can do in a film camera, you're basically learning it within digital. When I went to school to learn about photography, they taught us about all these techniques of contrast and light, and these were the things I think about when I take a shot. Of course, when I go out and I see a scene where there's natural light, or if I see a place where something is more contrasty or well defined, My mind, as a photographer who's been trained to do this, already thinks about that. My film isn't making me think about contrasting it differently. And besides, we're talking about you're probably going to go back and do some post-production, so. Next, film was already perfect. Some of the greatest images that we have seen today have been taken by film photographers, and we think of that as, okay, film is perfect and beautiful, but that photographer had a lot of experience, he shot around, and he knew what he was doing with it. Now, looking at their new generation of photographers, which I'm talking to photojournalists here, we're talking about people who can go out, get the shot, and produce it in a timely news fashion. When we say things like film was perfect, we're talking about film was perfect at that time. It was great if you're a news photographer and you had a processing team that can get you your photos back in the next few minutes, or if you have the ability to go in and process it yourself. Now, most days as a digital photographer, I go out, I shoot my photos, and I actually transmit them over to my iPad, and I'm able to send those photos off to my editor within that hour. So again, the question is, film was perfect, but was it just perfect for that time? Film has better tonal range. Okay, I've heard this quite a bit. Usually when people say things like that, they go, yeah, the tones were a little bit better because I was shooting in black and white and I could see my darks and my shadows a little bit better. Okay. Me, I shoot almost exclusively in RAW, so anything that you're telling me that that camera can do in film, I most likely can reproduce it in RAW. And that's the reason that we use RAW in that format exists, because I can go there and get those high range tonalities. So when we're talking about tonal ranges again, and you're saying, oh, these tonal ranges are great in black and white, most photographers that I've talked to, they shoot things in color and convert it over to black and white later. It slows you down. Again, we're talking about that one aspect of film photography, the limitations of numbers and whatever you have in your roll of film. There were times where I literally went out to shoot something to get like this great dusk photo. And then all of a sudden the light changed and I was stuck with the film that I had at that time. Obviously, if I have digital, I'm able to switch my ISOs and keep on trucking. The real question is, what are you shooting where you're not slowing down to think about it? If you're just running down the streets taking happy snaps, then we're not having the same conversation. So if you're saying, well, I'm shooting film, it's making me slow down. Hey, I'm shooting with digital. I need that time to find my foreground, middle ground, and background. So obviously, I need to take that moment to slow down as well. So again, I don't understand that argument. The unexpected imperfections of film. All right, and I know this really sounds like I'm bashing on film photographers a lot. I keep reading these articles where people say, I found these imperfections with my photos, or I shot something and I got something back that wasn't expected. To me, I go, I never want that to happen. Every time I go out and shoot, I'm shooting with intentionality, and either I have a successful photo or I have an unsuccessful photo. So if you're telling me I'm going out there with a tool that may be imperfect or I may not get back what I expect, that's not what I want. I am shooting for consistency. I want to make sure that every shot that I shot comes with a bit of intentionality and that I meant to get that. Sure, I have taken photos where I've literally just quick drew and took a shot not knowing my settings, and I had something that I could use later. Awesome. But most of the time, I will never want to be in a situation where I don't know what I'm going to come back with. That's why we spend so much on these cameras. No post-production. Okay, it was actually funny. I saw that on a few reputable websites where they kept saying things like, no post-production when it comes to film photography. I don't know any photographer who will tell you, I shot this right off the camera, here it is. Most photographers will go and touch up their work. If you're telling me you got that shot off of just pulling out your camera and shooting with film, great on you, you're super lucky for that. There's been very few times I've literally went, click, I'm done. Even in my last trip where I went to Japan and walked around shooting exclusively JPEG, it was moments where I wish I had shot it with RAW. So, I don't know what people are talking about when they say, oh, when I shoot film, I have no post-production. I don't want this to be one of those videos where it just seems like I'm bashing on film photographers, because that's not what I'm here to do. I really just wanted to sit here and talk about it because I like film photography too. I take it out for a challenge just to kind of recenter myself. But when it comes to me as a photojournalist, where my next paycheck is dependent on the photo I take, I'm gonna go with digital because I have that wiggle room to make that photo work. At the end of the day, each photographer is different. Whatever tool you use to help you get the image is great, okay? If you are one of those photographers who can go out and take 12 images and all 12 of them are perfect, or they help you tell that story, more power to you. As I said in the beginning of this video, I'm a snob sometimes too when I see that my kid can take a beautiful iPhone photo where I'm sitting there with a tripod and my big Fujifilm camera trying to get that perfect exposure as well. All I'm asking is for you to get out there and just shoot. But if you're asking for the CLC opinion, I'm going digital.